Hello, guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing another episode of our Jurassic World Evolution 2 mod spotlights. This will be part 68. So we'll have a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and use them to compare them to the real life fossil counterparts. All that good stuff, you know. Love these kind of updates. So we've actually got a couple packs today. So one's got a pack of a bunch of new plesiosaurs that we'll have a look at. And then the next one's going to be Hawkowl returning again with a really nice cosmetic updates on Ankylosaurs. And you know how much I like Hawkowl's edits and really giving some of the animals that don't get all these edits some love. So I'm really excited to get stuck into it. So I'm going to be starting off today with the Plesiosaur pack. So this Plesiosaur pack was done by Master Dude. We've got 3 different species in here. We're going to be starting off with the earliest one, where we've got Rellosa. So here we are. Let's see if we can get one just a little bit of a nicer position. I'll have a look at you there. Oh wait, no. I think they'll probably be direction. Let's see if we can find her. Damn it. It always happens. Anyway. Oh, look at you. You look nice. So this is Rellosaurus. So Rellosaurus, which means strong lizard, these guys are a type of extinct genus of plesiosaur from the early Jurassic. It comes from the Touricarian stage, so about 183 to 175 million years ago. So it's Rhombellosaurid phylosaurid from North Hampshire and from Yorkshire in the UK, and was first named by Harry Steele in 1874, and the type species is Rhombellosaurus cramptoni. And there's a few other species, about 3 other species described of this genus, about 4. It's actually one of the largest kind of first big marine reptile predators that hunted in Mesozoic oceans and got to about 7 meters long and about 20 or 23 feet long. And you can see it's kind of starting. Rhombellosaurids as a group, which is obviously named after this guy, were a group of really early pliosaurs that were just starting to get their kind of groove. This was before the plesiosaur and pliosaur kind of split was a thing. So their own little group that kind of had big heads, but also had a little bit of a longer neck compared. And they're a little bit earlier in their evolution, so they didn't quite evolve to be quite so big and powerful. Though I think the earliest large marine predators one is kind of wrong, because we had a lot of big ichthyosaurs from the late Jurassic as well. But being a large predator with big teeth, as you can see going on here, very, very big teeth, would have eaten a lot of smaller marine reptiles like ichthyosaurs and turtles, but also ammonites and other plesiosaurs as well. So the first species, cramptoni, was first discovered in 1848 in July, where it was found in the Elm Quarry in Keltness near Womby in Yorkshire, England. And it was found to be from the Werribee mudstone that dated to be about 183 to 180 million years ago. It is actually a complete skeleton, which preserved the skull, was kept for 5 years in the Mulgrave Castle, and then was acquired by the Marquess of Normanby, and then was kind of given to Sir Philip Crampton, who was a surgeon and anatomist who kind of researched it. And in the same year, it was transferred to Dublin, to at the British Royal meeting, and the Zoological Society of England actually built a special building to help hold this guy. And then after a decade, still remaining undescribed, it was given to the Royal Dublin Museum, and it was described as a new species of Plesiosaurus. Plesiosaurus was traditionally just like a waste bucket taxon. They threw anything that was a marine reptile with a long neck, it was a Plesiosaurus. But then that was actually originally described as Plesiosaurus cramptoni. But then in 1874, it was described as Rhombellosaurus and became the holotype for the family Rhombellosauridae, which was kind of the first big group of pliosaurs that before they kind of got their really, really big heads that we get like Lepleurodon and Kronosaurus. This was kind of right before that time. And only in 2006 the skull was actually prepared to enable the restudy of the genus. And there's been other species as well. There's Polarcanthus, which was found in the same kind of place. I think a lot of these could be considered like valid, but there's quite a few species that's considered valid at the moment. I found it pretty much all around the same place, and there has been dozens of redesigned species that were different genera. Like Rhomboceles victor was re-described as a genus called Merosaurus, 2010, and there's another one that's been called Anchronodon and Thamatosaurus, another one as well. But being taxonomy and taxonomy, marine reptiles taxonomy is arguably even worse than like dinosaur taxonomy. So yeah, it's kind of one of those. What do we do? But it seems to be at least that a lot of them are now considered to be phyletic. So a lot of the species they are related to each other. Which is good. And in terms of paleobiology, as I mentioned, early Jurassic predator, so this would have been probably not too long after the big extinction of the Jurassic. So these were kind of the first guys to get big and be those big apex predators. And they actually may have picked up scents while submerged by letting water flow through sensory organs. Kind of like, sort of like a Jacobson's organ, things like that. And this is actually quite similar to modern sharks that allows them to hunt prey. A lot of other pliosaurs would have used that as well to be able to hunt prey. But you can see by that body shape, it's very much kind of got that really big head, but still got a longer neck. A really, really cool mod. I'm definitely a big fan of this guy. I really, really love him. I like Master Dude's mods, and cool to see some underrated species. Not to see that big guy. Really gives it a lot of character. Definitely a really cool animal. So we're gonna let you swim off and do your thing. I just want to make sure they get out of the way for the next animal. So next up, we've got a smaller one. So this one is all the way back up into the late Cretaceous. So we'll talk about this guy. This guy was actually quite recently described, so I'm really excited to talk about this guy. We've got Sympanosucops. So this is a really cool one. Definitely a big fan. Let's see if we can find. Oh, are you out of the? Oh, give you a little. Let's look at you. I like this one. This one's got a character, I think. There we are. It's perfect pose. Looks very dynamic. So this is Sympanosucops. Really interesting animal. It means snarky crocodile face. So this is a genus of polycotylid plesiosaur that comes from the late Cretaceous Pear Shale in Wyoming, and is known from the single species S. proliferae, which is known from a partial skeleton. So I'm going to explain why this guy's really, really weird after I go through its discovery and naming. So it was first described, the holotype was first found in Old Woman alkaline in the Pear Shale in 1995, and that shows kind of how long it takes for some fossils to get described. And then it was brought to the collection of the Palon Museum in Glen Road, and the locality has been dated to Lower Maastrichtian of the Upper Cretaceous, about 69 to 70 million years ago. And the skeleton itself consists of a partial skull, lower jaw, a vertebral column, and the left ischium and pubis. And in 2022, it was described as a new genus, as a polycotylid plesiosaur, by Walter S. Persons, Haley P. Street, and Amanda Kelly, and based on these remains. So the generic name means Sympanosucops, which means serpent, snake, or the serpent meaning snake. So snaky crocodile faces, not snarky, snaky. So it's because it's got a long neck like a snake, and it's got a face like a crocodile. And the specific name is Pulsare, honors Anna Pulsver, whose land the holotype was discovered on. So honors the person that kind of found it, or whose land it was on. So that's really, really cool. So Sympanosuchus is a medium-sized, Sucops, is a medium-sized plesiosaur, reached about 7 meters long, so decent-sized. But it's unusual, and it's really unusual among derived plesiosaurs, as it had both a long neck and a long snout. And in contrast, things like elasmosaurids and those kind of animals had much longer necks. But what's really weird is that pliosaurs and polycotylids have shorter necks, and polycotylids actually evolved from longer-necked ancestors. So polycotylids are plesiosaurs, so very typical plesiosaur, but then they evolved over time to get shorter necks to look more like a pliosaur. But what's weird on this guy is these guys are a little bit more derived in the evolutionary lineage. They're still considered kind of basal, but the polycotylids were already losing that short neck. So these guys kind of, what happened was is that pterosaurs, not pterosaurs, plesiosaurs got that long neck, and then the polycotylids shrunk it down. But this guy within the polycotylids is like, nah, I want my long neck back, and then evolved that long neck back again. So it's like a great example of like convergent evolution and how often things can just re-evolve in lineage. Like it had a short, it already had a long neck, then it got a short neck, now it's got a long neck again. So that shows how complicated these things can be. And what's really weird as well is still got that characteristic head of a polycotylid, which is like a really long snout. If you look at like dolichoryncops and animals like that, they've got a very, very long snout, almost very dolphin-like. So it's like a dolphin head on a plesiosaur, which is really interesting. And this unusual feature may just been what niche it was kind of looking around for. So its long neck may have been allowed it to be more like flexible, and it would have been able to catch prey probably faster, and that longer snout may have actually allowed them to maybe hunt either slightly bigger prey or maybe better catch more slippery prey like small fish and things like that. So really interesting. It's just weird how animals can come out sometimes, and it's such a weird animal I like talking about. So in phylogenetic analyses, it is a member of the polycotylid, and it's sister to groups like Dolichoryncops, Georgosaurus, and Trimenomyricum, and its long snout was likely an ancestral trait. So the ancestors of Sympanosucops had that long head, but they had a short neck. But then over time, they would have evolved that longer neck that it would have been derived. So it already had a short neck, but then re-evolved that long neck. And to be like with convergent evolution with the ancestral plesiosaurs and elasmosaurs and more basal members of the group. So that shows like sometimes nature just likes plagiarizing itself. It's like, no, I want this longer again. And it does it. So that's why I think Ceratosucops is a very, very interesting animal. And it was only described a couple of years ago. Such a very, very cool animal. And a really great one to show off in this pack. So yeah, definitely a big fan. So now we're going to let these guys swim off and do their thing. So last but certainly not least, in this pack, we've got another really interesting plesiosaur. We have got Montura. Very, very cool. So let them swim off. I don't know what you're doing over there. See. Oh, that's a nice pose. We'll look at them like that. No, I like this one. Look at this one. One's cool. Nice backdrop. Okay, so this is Montanura. Well, it's an extinct genus of plesiosaur, not surprising, but comes from the late Cretaceous of Antarctica. If you guys have seen the second season of Prehistoric Planet, you will be familiar with this guy. So the place that was found, the Lopez de Bendano Formation, is located on Seymour Island in Antarctica, which is exposed present all but the northwestern third of the island. And during the summers of 1981 to 1985, those kind of summers, there were lots of expeditions by paleontologists to go down and collect fossils, and they found 8 partial skeletons of a plesiosaur, which is very interesting. And they found them, and they were quite difficult to excavate because of permafrost and things like that. And also the cold temperatures also prevented the plaster that is typically used to take away fossils and take care of them and make sure they don't get damaged on the way home. It wouldn't set. So there was definitely a lot of challenges. So it was first described in 1989. It was named a new genus Ternaria seymorensis, as the species name kind of referred to Seymour Island. And then the generic name honors Dr. Morturner, which was one of the paleontologists who was interested in the studies there. However, the name itself was already taken. So Ternaria was actually used by an hymenopteran insect. So it was already used by hymenopterans, which includes like wasps and bees and things like that. So in light of this, he actually renamed it in 1994 as Monturia, and this is before the generic names honors Montura, which is pretty cool. But however, there was another study in 2003 that actually suggests these guys were so similar to another plesiosaur or another elasmosaurid or whatever. It is technically an elasmosaurid, to Asterectes, which sort of may be a juvenile, but then it was kind of lumped, and then it was re-examined, and they are found to be different, and there has been some looking into it as well, and suggests that it is its own thing. So Asterectes is another really close relative of this guy, but we'll talk about why they're so interesting. So you can see they've got a very interesting body compared to a lot of elasmosaurids. You think of elasmosaurus, they've got super, super long necks, but these guys were their own group called the Structonectes, so they were their own kind of group within the elasmosaurs, a different family. And the main thing that set them apart was the smaller heads, shorter necks, or larger heads, smaller necks, and you've got lots and lots of little teeth. And this, I guess, you guys will what I'll talk about next. But since we found more and more of this, we've actually suggested that, and so looking into its ecology and things like that, interpreted the juvenile being a smaller size and the lactophysian arch, but then the downward curving teeth of the lower jaw, and like lots of the teeth, and there's lots of other adaptations that suggest that unlike most plesiosaurs, this guy was a filter feeder. So it's believed that these guys, and this is what was depicted doing in season 2 of Prehistoric Planet, it was depicted feeding very similar things like grey whales and some other filter feeders. What they do is they'll kind of scoop up sand and then filter out all the sand from their mouths, and keeping whatever animals in there that they're filtering out in their mouth, and then let the sand filter out through their teeth. And then they would have ejected that sediment-laden water, and then they would have preyed on these small amphipods and small other animals living within the sediments. So that's a very interesting ecology, and it's not seen in a lot of other plesiosaurs. So it's a really interesting interpretation. Closest animals I can think of is like grey whales, but I'm sure there's a lot of animals that kind of employ that kind of ecology, but they could have eaten just anything small enough. But yeah, really, really cool that we get filter feeding plesiosaurs, because a lot of people ask, it's like, why were there no big filter feeders like blue whales and things like that during the Cretaceous or during the Mesozoic? And that was because the conditions didn't really support big filter feeders like that, because blue whales pretty much almost exclusively feed on krill, and krill wasn't really that much of a thing. It did evolve in the Jurassic, but the big ice, the climate change and the Ice Age kind of made them much more common, because they always liked cooler waters, so that allowed them to get real big. Though there were big whales before that. It just seems for whatever reason, it's one of the big leading reasons, but for whatever reason, we just don't get that many big filter feeding marine reptiles, and this is kind of bucks that trend. We do get some pretty big ones, and they could have got about 10 meters or so. These guys are a little bit smaller, but Asterixes, I believe, has put estimates of up to 10 meters, so definitely a big filter feeder. Not blue whale size, but up there with some of the smaller ones, like, minkies and things like that. Minkies and potentially even grey whales and humpbacks. Still really, really cool. So yeah, I'll let you swim off and do your thing. So this pack was done by the 3 species, Rhombelosaurus, Serpentsucops, and Montura, I believe you say that, was done by Master Doot, so made this plesiosaur pack, and he did a great job. The only thing I would recommend is maybe making a Prehistoric Planet skin for the Montura, because that was a really nice skin, and that was one of my favourite segments. I love Prehistoric Planet to death. I need to watch it again. I'm going to sit down and watch it again. Maybe I could do something with a video on it. I don't know. Maybe, what you guys think? I'm open to suggestions. But anything about that, we are going to move on to the Ankylosaur cosmetic pack. So this is by HawkOwl1215, who is one of my favorites. Always love those paleo cosmetics, so I get to talk about them. So we all know HawkOwl has done sauropods, has done the feathered ones as well, also done ceratopsians and stegosaurs, but now finally moved on to ankylosaurs. So another group that really hasn't got many paleo updates, but really excited to get stuck into this one. So we're going to be starting off with some of the smaller ones. I kind of did it in an interesting order, so we're going to be starting off with the smallest one. We have got Minmi. So this one is kind of a cheat, because Minmi is not actually that well known. So let's have a look. We'll have a look at one over here. Which one do we think we should have a look at? I want to have a look at this one. We'll look at him. So, not Montura. This is Minmi. So, Minmi was first described in like the 80s, 90s, around then. But there has been many different specimens found, mostly very fragmentary, and there's been studies looking into the variation within those specimens. And then there was one that was really well preserved and was considered its own species, Counterparts, which is what this is based on. It's much more complete than most of the specimens of Minmi. So it was actually sometimes even argued that Minmi is a nomen dubium or a nomen nubium, which is basically means they don't have enough diagnostic characteristics to be able to say if we were to compare that bone to another bone of another Ankylosaurus, will be like that's actually Minmi and that's not. They're originally going to argue like nah, there's no way to tell a Minmi. There's no diagnostic feature, so we should just not worry about that name because it's pretty much useless. But they actually found some diagnostic traits. So Minmi still exists technically, just hanging on by a thread. But most reconstructions of Minmi at the moment will be based on Counterparts, which is a very close relative. They're all a member of the group Pan-Ankylosauria. So Pan-Ankylosauria was a really early group of Ankylosaurs that was actually just described. It includes SoraPalter, Counterparts, Minmi, and Stegosaurus, which was actually recently described as well. A little South American one with very interesting patterns to it. So yeah, this is very much based on Counterparts, which is pretty cool. So you can see he's not quite as really, really basal. You can see the kind of before the split even between, Nodosaurs and Ankylosaurs. This was like the very early one, right at the beginning of the Jurassic pretty much, because we do have some Nodosaur stuff, even probably the early Jurassic or the first of these guys. But you can see really, really cute. They've got that very, very cute look to them. They've got very box face. We actually have a pretty good specimen. I mean, I've actually seen it in real life when I went to SVP in Brisbane. They do have at the Queensland Museum one that's pretty much perfectly preserved with all its osteoderms and scutes and all preserved together. So it's an animal that we really do know much about. But yeah, it's technically not Minmi, but it's the next best thing. And I have to say, I love this little mod. That's one of the cutest ones, I think. And I just love Counterparts. It's such a cool animal. Definitely a big fan of this little guy. And Hockout did a great job giving it new skins and everything. And I like the patterns as well. I'm kind of a bit more fan of the basic ones. But yeah, it looks really, really nice. I'm definitely a big fan. So, we're going to let you run off and do your thing, little guys. Look at these little Minmis. Look at these little guys. We'll have to wait until they've kind of moved away from my... Do not watch the animation. I feel like being generous. Let's watch the animation. So next up, we're going to America. So next up, we have got Nodosaurus. Let's have a look at this guy. Oh, no, let's synthesize. Nice. So here is Nodosaurus. We'll have a look at you. So this is Nodosaurus. So the one originally in game, it's called Nodosaurus, but it's actually based off the wonderful specimen of Polarcanthus, which is, I think, a really wonderful animal, and I think we should get it in the game because it's just so amazing. It's an amazing fossil, and we even know the colors and the gut contents. It's such an amazing fossil. And I did make a mod. JFD made a mod for me for the first game. I think I should ask them whether I should put them on the ask them to put it in 2 somehow, because it was just such a nice model. Maybe ask Hockout to make one, because it's just such a beautiful fossil and such an awesome animal. So this is much more similar to what Nodosaurus would have actually looked like. It was more closely related to things like SoraPalter than things like Polarcanthus, which we'll be covering soon as well. So we can see it's got these big shoulder spikes going on here, so that would have been... one thing also that Polarcanthus showed us is that the bone cores, very similar to like modern animals with horns, is typically the keratin covering of most bone cores is about an extra half of the length of the bone. So based on Borealis-Palter, that evidence, you can see these kind of spikes have been greatly elongated, and you'll see that even more in SoraPalter when we cover it. So you can see these are greatly extended. Got that very, very long face. These guys are most likely more selective feeders. Very, very cool. And you can see those osteoderms along the body. And you can see this is a later ankylosaur or later Nodosaur. So you can see got that big round body, big bulky legs with some osteoderms around its legs, for protection as well. And it doesn't have the club tail that a lot of later ankylosaurs or a lot of other ankylosaurs, like Ankylosaurus and Yorphocephalus and things like that had. But yeah, very, very interesting one. More like a little bit more basic than SoraPalter. Still a really cool animal, and we actually got the proper animal. So, Hockel, if you want to bring back the original Borealis-Palter, I think that would be a great new animal as well. So that's my little suggestion for him. But yeah, really, really cool. Love the skins. One thing as well is this mod requires the extra colors mod or expanded color palette mod. So that's really gets a lot of the extra colors that you can put extra patterns and things as well. So it comes out really, really nice. And you can see some extra ones here, different colors. I like this green one. This green one actually comes out rather nicely. Really, really strong colors and looks really, really nice. Definitely a big fan. So that's Nodosaurus. Oh, let's let you run off and do your thing. We don't want you hanging around there. Man, I want to get rid of this notification, this park close thing. I hope to get rid of it next update or so. Okay, so anyway, next up we're going to England. We have got Polarcanthus. So let's have a look. Oh, and it's doing it. Anyway, we'll move back again. So here is not Borealis-Palter. This is Polarcanthus. I don't know why I got those two mixed up. But anyway, Polarcanthus, everyone's favorite European ankylosaur or UK ankylosaur or nodosaur. Famous for being in Walking with Dinosaurs, but we can see much more accurate kind of body here. Maybe based on a little bit more outdated kind of skeletal, but still looks pretty spot on to me. So you can see he's got that very wide face. And it's actually a bit more confusing because there's actually a lot more stegas and no, I can't get the words right. A lot more nodosaurs in the Wessex Formation than we thought. I think there was a recently one that was just described last year, I believe, called SoraPalter. So it's another one within Polarcanthus that was described. So it shows that even with it's just going to change a lot. So it's still a really nice reconstruction. I love the characteristic kind of spikes down the back. I like this one as well. It'd be cool to like have a cosmetic that gives you the Walking with Dinosaur skin. I know everyone would eat that up because we don't like those skins, but you can see it's got a very wide body. Very hard to find good skeletals of Polarcanthus, but I'm sure he managed to do that for this wonderful mod. And I love the colors on this one in particular. I'm honestly a very big fan of my Dells colors, but sometimes I do really like bright colors because, for every bright colored bird, there's like 10 brown or black birds. But sometimes it's just some things it just comes perfect and you get a really nice colorful design that looks realistic. But yeah, I'm really, really big fan of this guy. Another nice Polarcanthus. Definitely really, really cool. You can see the proper anatomy, proper toes. The same with all these guys, proper toes. We'll use you as an example. That's a good one here. So you've got the 4 toes there, the 3 there, another one there. Looks very proper toes. I think they actually had one that wasn't, so that one I don't think had a nail. Might have an extra nail. And then you have the 4 toes back there. So these guys had 4 and 4, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, it came out really, really nice. Really, really cool. Definitely a big fan. Alright, so I don't know why you sent me all over there. Polarcanthus. Next up, come on. Get out of the way, please. Next up, we have got SoraPalter, as I mentioned. So this one's the much more extreme one. So let's come on. All right, we got the much more extreme one. We've got SoraPalter. So here he is, and I love this guy. So this is SoraPalter, everyone's big spiky, Notosaurus' big spiky brother, but you can see the main thing that makes it famous is these huge shoulder spikes. And I'm not sure the exact length of these shoulder spikes bone core, but if you think about adding, like as I mentioned before with the Notosaurus, the extra, like half of it would have been keratin at least. So you can think about these huge spikes and how good they would have been for defenses. Although, there is evidence, as I talk about properly with either Opisthophilus or Ankylosaurus, that the clubs may have actually been a lot more for sexual display than busting down predators' shins, pretty much. But yeah, really, really cool. Very similar to the Notosaurus, probably covering the same ground, but you can see a lot bigger and bulkier. I really love the skin as well. They're like the lighter, and then the darker back. That's really, really nice. Love the colors of the osteoderms as well. Really, really cool. Definitely a big fan. One thing as well I'm going to mention with the Polarcanthus is that this is much more based off older reconstructions of Gastonia. So I'm not sure how accurate that can be now. Gastonia is a closer relative of Polarcanthus from North America. But these guys are kind of their own sort of group that is in between, pretty much. Some have even suggested that Notosaurus or Notosaurs would are actually, Ankylosaurs would have been there like 4 or 5 different groups. So you got Panankylosauria, then Polarcanthids, then you've got your Notosaurs and Struthiosaurs, which are like Struthiosaurus, which is a Ankylosaur from, not Ankylosaur, a Notosaur from Europe, late Cretaceous. So there's like lots of little groups and things like that. It's taxonomy being taxonomy, very confusing as per usual. But you can see how they're changing. Like this is a really early one. This is what early Ankylosaurs, especially Australian ones, will look like. Starting to get to the middle Cretaceous, and you're getting these kind of guys. As we keep going, we get our Ankylosaurs. So this is our latest and greatest of the Notosaurs. And then we'll be moving on to Ankylosaurs. So yeah, really, really cool. I'll let you run off and do your thing. Just get out of the way from my... as per usual, you know, they always like to block off. So next up, we have got Crichtonopelta, which is... I'll get to why it's called Crichtonopelta and not Crichtonosaurus. See if you can find one in a good position. Look at this cool guy. I'm definitely a big fan of Crichtonopelta. Very, very cute. So this is considered a new species by like Hockel because it changes the name, but it's pretty much just Crichtonosaurus, just renamed. So why is it called Crichtonopelta and not Crichtonosaurus? So there were a bunch of specimens, and actually 2 species ascribed to Crichtonosaurus, but then Victoria Arbour, who is a researcher that pretty much specializes in ankylosaurs, she was like, okay, Crichtonosaurus is actually a nomedubium. We actually is the same thing with Minmi that what they try to do with Minmi, they succeeded doing with Crichtonosaurus. They were like, okay, there's no diagnostic features. I can't really tell it apart anyway from other fossils. So it's like, what's the point of having it? So what they did is got rid of the name, and then she renamed it and got some diagnostic features for Crichtonopelta. So you still get the name. So Crichtonosaurus and Crichtonopelta were both named in honor of Michael Crichton. So Saurus just means lizard. So Michael Crichton's lizard, and Martin Crichton's pelta was like Martin Crichton's shield, I believe, of skin. So this is Crichtonopelta belodexis. So this is an Asian species of ankylosaur. Although the earlier ones. Kind of sad we actually don't get anything like Minotaurosaurus or Takurnia in Dressrosa Evolution 2. But anyway, I believe there's mods. Anyway, there's mods with them. But yeah, one of the Asian ankylosaurs. These guys were a little bit earlier. And it's actually known from a few specimens. There'll be about 3 or 4. And one of the really weird things is got these really big plates. So that's one of the weird things that sets it apart. I'm not sure if there's kind of these big wing plates. A lot of like a museum mounts have them that way, but they could potentially have been like flat on the body. But it gives them a really interesting look, and you can see they've got that very long body. You can see they're very much like an ankylosaur, very much more squat, much more round, much more square heads and longer tails. And you can see they're starting to develop that tail club. Why, if you look at these notosaurs, they don't have the tail club, much more longer legged, still big round bodies and much narrower heads. The main things you can tell in ankylosaurs is they've got much bigger, squarer heads, lower bodies, rounder bodies as well, lower to the ground, because these guys didn't quite have those big spikes. But as I'll get into, they had very interesting osteoderms that allowed them to. They've actually been a lot of research on Ankylosaurus, and that'll probably be the one more I talk about that suggests the osteoderms are actually quite well adapted for defending against predators. So yeah, really, really cool. Really, really awesome. So that's Crichtonopelta. So I'm going to let you run off and do your thing. But we're going to move on. Next up, so we've got our big ankylosaurs now. We have got Yelpocephalus. Another really cool one. So here's Yelpocephalus. Very cool guy. And it does it again. Alright, let's have a look. Let's see which one is... Have a look at this one. This one's probably the perfect one, but look at this guy. This is Yelpocephalus, a little bit of an earlier relative, things like Ankylosaurus. And you can see this is really much later in the evolution. This guy was from the late Cretaceous, a bit earlier. I think like Cenomanian, like early stages before the Maastrichtian, like later Cretaceous, like 70, 80 million years ago. And you can see they're really starting to develop that big tail, the big tail club that they would have used on each other, as we'll get into. But you can see got all these osteoderms, very spiky as well, very big, rounder head, much squarer head compared to the notosaurs. You can see that going on. Along with osteoderms, they've also got these big like neck rings going on and some big spikes going along them. So they didn't have quite that big turtle shell, which was interesting. A lot of people, older interpretations, just said like very much like a turtle shell. It seems they would have had like big scales with bands like this, as you can see, probably to be a bit more flexible. Big round belly for digesting plants. But I'll talk about with the ankylosaurs. So there's a relative of this guy, a little bit earlier. His name's Zool. So Zool is a later ankylosaur, not quite as late as like Ankylosaurus and Yelpocephalus, but kind of this kind of species or related. So Zool is a very interesting animal. So there was a study recently, a couple of years ago, that looked into the specimen of Zool that had injuries that were along the osteoderms here, and they actually did a little bit of research, and they thought, if you look at these clubs side by side and they were whacking each other with it, that's where the injuries from the club would be. So one of the more leading hypotheses, and that we actually have evidence of now, is that these clubs may have actually been much more of a sexual, evolved much more for sexual display, or a way for dominance, kind of like the antlers on a deer or the feathers of a peacock, a male peacock, as a way to kind of show dominance and compete for mates. And I think that shows a really interesting thing in paleontology as well. A lot of these things, we see big spiky ornaments or big horns, things like that, and we think, it must be for killing predators. But if you actually think about it for a little bit, how many times a lot of herbivores don't actually encounter them much in their life. So if you think about it, like if you think the antlers on a deer or the horns on an antelope or the big feathers of a peafowl or any kind of other pheasants that has like the Reeves pheasant, those really long tail feathers that actually are disadvantageous to their survival. It actually seems like that's a much more stronger force of who gets to breed or not for evolution than just predation. So I think it's really cool that we're starting to go back and things like, it's not actually just adapted for killing things. They weren't just murder machines. These were animals that wanted to eat and wanted to breed and continue their generations. They were under the same pretty much pressures as every animal alive today is. And I think we often overlook that because we have this very also bro like, this has a big club, that means club kill T-Rex shin, which means must be adapted for that. But it seems to have been much more adapted on each other, which is quite interesting. And oh, I love this color on this one with the red on that. It looks really, really nice. So you can see all the wonderful skins that come with the extra colors as well. But yeah, really, really nice and cool to talk about that evolution as well. Oh, and that was a bit of a zoom. But okay, we're going to let you run off and do your thing. Because we got, last but certainly not least, we got everyone's favorite big bad. You know, technically the latest and the greatest of the Ankylosaurs. If you think about it, we have got Ankylosaurus. So here is Ankylosaurus. Let's have a look. Which one can we have a look at? We'll have a look at you because you look so nice. So we've got Ankylosaurus, probably the most well-known, famous of the group, where they get their name from, the biggest and baddest, you could say. So they got like 8 to 9 meters long, so really, really huge. So, and you can see they've got the largest, pretty much, of all the tail clubs. There's one called Anodontosaurus that has like a really, really weird shaped one, but I believe this one's kind of considered the largest. So this is Ankylosaurus. Almost needs no introduction. But this is an animal that's gone through a lot of revisions through history. As you can see, it's got that very big, squat face. Looks much better than the Jurassic World Evolution one, originally, definitely. Big skull, especially around the osteoderms. So the one in the game kind of has these big spikes going down, almost like bands on like an armadillo. But actually, these guys would have had more osteoderms. So kind of you see these large ones in the skin, and then like kind of smaller, bigger scales in between. And these have these like rings on the neck that would have been defense, most likely against predators or wax from other ankylosaurs, and some on the legs as well for defense. You can see that very much squat body for defense and from each other and from predators. So this is the one that is kind of the latest and greatest, and it's almost considered that because of living with Tyrannosaurus Rex. So Tyrannosaurus Rex would have most likely been a big predator for these guys. And you can see that tail club here, as I mentioned, it could be most likely used for sexual defense. But this would have been great against a Tyrannosaurus. And there've been lots of research into how they would swing it as well, and how they would have been able to destroy shins. And there's also been some research onto the osteoderms of Ankylosaurus, and they're actually really interesting shape. You can see the shape of them. They're not just like big round ones. They've actually got like a little bit of a shape to them, a bit of a sharp end. And they actually did some research, and they looked at how if a dinosaur was going to bite on it, like a T-Rex was about to bite it, it actually, that kind of goes between the groove of the jaw, and that could actually dislodge teeth. So it was basically a way of like extra defense, because it would basically knock the teeth out of them if they tried to bite on them. So that was an extra layer of defense on these guys, which is, I think, so interesting. But yeah, definitely one of the more well-known ones. You can see all these like little ones along there, and you've got the bigger feature ones, the feature osteoderms, and smaller ones within the skin as well. Very squat body, big round face, very charismatic, and pretty much fits what we actually know of Ankylosaurus. And you can see the 4 toes there on the front and back. Just looks so awesome. I'm definitely a big fan. It's nice to see Ankylosaurus done right, you know. Much lower to body, much thicker legs, proper feet, big round skull, shorter tail, just big and round and everything in Ankylosaurus glory. So it looks pretty much spot on to what we know of Ankylosaurus, which is one of the better known Ankylosaurs and much the well studied, because of course it's the biggest and best, and or the biggest and greatest in size, technically. Whether it's the greatest is your personal opinion, but still a really, really cool animal and really capture the imagination. A lot of research gone into this guy. So yeah, one thing I would like though, I just love the Saurian one. The Saurian one with like the bright colors as well, with like the red, like the box turtle colors. It looks so perfect. It fits so well, and you think of an animal like this that you want to be scaring away predators using bright colors like a red and blue, would be like, nah, don't mess with me. I'll mess you up, especially with that. And they probably wouldn't have been preyed on too much. Probably were still prey for T-Rex, but with that club, I'm sure they would have thought twice. Be a really, really awesome animal. So yeah, that was Hawk Owl's 1215's Ankylosaur pack, or covering remaking all of the Ankylosaurs in the game, from Minmi all the way up to Ankylosaurus, to be much more paleo accurate. So I think this is a great place to end the video. So first of all, I want to thank HawkOwl1215 for really making this wonderful paleo edit, and Master Dude for making that Plesiosaur pack. Really, really awesome to talk about some of that diversity that we don't get to talk about so much, and some recent finds. Really, really cool, especially Serpanosuchus, is that's a not Suchus, Sucops, which is really cool. But yeah, anyway, so I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.